She laughed when she said it. That's the part I keep coming back to. Dad, we've already signed the papers on the ranch. The closing is Friday. You have until Sunday to get your things out. She didn't ask. She didn't explain. She laughed a short, bright little sound, like she was telling me she'd gotten a good deal on groceries. And then she said, I know this is a lot to process, but honestly, it's for the best. I held the phone against my ear and looked out the kitchen window at the north pasture. The sun was coming down behind the ridge, turning the grass the color of old copper. I had watched that same sunset from that same window for 31 years. Is that so? I said. Dad, come on. You're 68 years old. You can't run a ranch by yourself. We've talked about this. We had not talked about this. Not once. Not ever. You'll love the retirement community, my son added. He had been listening on speaker this whole time, which I only realized when he spoke. They have a pool, a putting green. I didn't say anything for a moment. Dad, my daughter said, are you still there? I'm here, I said. I'm looking at the north pasture. Well, she said, and I could hear her getting impatient, the way she always did when I didn't respond the way she wanted. Start thinking about what you want to pack. You can't take everything, obviously. She had already spoken to a realtor. She had already found a buyer. She had already arranged the closing date. She told me all of this in the same cheerful, practical tone a person uses when they are managing a situation they have already decided is under control. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that she had just tried to sell something that didn't belong to her. And I had been waiting for exactly this moment for 14 months. My name is Robert Calloway. I spent 35 years as a civil engineer before I retired, and for 31 of those years I came home every evening to a ranch in western Montana that my father built and my grandfather before him had cleared by hand. 412 acres of high meadow and timber. A creek that ran cold even in August. A barn that needed painting every 5 years and got it every 5 years without fail. My wife Carol and I raised 2 children there, my daughter Melissa and my son Derek. They grew up riding horses and baling hay and complaining about both of those things with great enthusiasm. When they left for college, I missed them with a specific and physical ache that took years to soften. When they came back to visit, I cooked too much food and stayed up too late and felt, for a few days, like the house was the right size again. Carol died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I was with her every hour of those 8 weeks, and I will not say more about it than that, except that the grief I carried out of that hospital was the heaviest thing I have ever tried to move, and some of it I am still carrying. After she died, things shifted with my children in ways I didn't fully understand at first. Melissa called more often, which I was grateful for. But the calls had a different texture than before. She asked questions about the property, the acreage, the mineral rights, what I paid in property tax, whether I had thought about what I wanted to do with everything. I thought she was worried about me. I thought she was trying to understand the scope of what I was managing alone. Derek visited twice that first year. He brought his wife Amanda both times, which was fine, except that Amanda had a habit of walking through the house with a particular expression, something between appraisal and impatience, that I eventually recognized as the look of a person calculating what things were worth. The second visit, Derek sat me down at the kitchen table and told me I needed to think seriously about my future. He said the ranch was too much for one man. He said he had spoken to a financial advisor, his financial advisor who said that the property was significantly underperforming as an asset. He said the smart move would be to liquidate, take the capital, and move somewhere I could be properly cared for. I was 67 years old. I was healthy. I had just finished rerouting 200 feet of irrigation line by myself that spring. I told Derek I appreciated his concern and I would think about it. What I actually did was call my lawyer. Her name is Patricia Morse. I have known her for 20 years. She is meticulous, unhurried, and she has the specific quality I value most. In a person, she says exactly what she means. I drove into town the next morning and sat across from her in her office and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Robert, she said, has either of your children ever had access to your financial documents? Your deed? Your account information? I thought about it. I had given Melissa a copy of my will 2 years earlier, after Carol died. Standard procedure, Patricia had said at the time, and Derek had asked about the deed once, just to understand the property boundaries. He said, in case he ever wanted to help me manage the grazing leases. Patricia nodded slowly. I think, she said, we should make some changes. Over the next 6 weeks, we restructured everything. The ranch was transferred into an irrevocable trust, the Callaway Family Land Trust. The trust named me as the sole trustee and beneficiary during my lifetime. No one could sell, transfer, mortgage, or otherwise encumber the property without my written authorization and a formal trustee approval process that required a minimum of 30 days' notice. More importantly, the trust was recorded with the county. It was public record. Any title search conducted by any title company in the state of Montana would surface it within minutes. Patricia also drafted a new durable power of attorney one that explicitly excluded real estate transactions. Whatever my children might have obtained or photocopied or believed they had, it no longer covered the thing they most wanted. I told no one. I went home and rerouted another 60 feet of irrigation line and watched the north pasture at sunset and felt, for the first time since Carol died, like I had done something smart. That was 14 months before my daughter called me laughing. In those 14 months, I watched my children with new eyes. I am not proud of how much it hurt to do that. I had built my understanding of them over 6 decades. Melissa, who used to fall asleep in the truck on the way home from town and had to be carried inside. Derek, who cried for 2 days when his first dog died and made me promise we would bury her under the big cottonwood by the creek. These were my children. These were also, I now understood, adults who had looked at the land their grandparents had cleared and their parents had kept and thought, how do we get our hands on that? The call came on a Tuesday evening in October. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I walked out to the barn, not because I needed to do anything, just because I needed to be somewhere that felt solid. The horses shifted in their stalls. I stood in the dark and breathed the smell of hay and leather and thought about my father, who had told me once that land was the only thing that didn't lie to you. The next morning I called Patricia. It's happened, I said. Tell me exactly what they said. I told her. She was quiet for a moment. They've already gone to closing? Friday, apparently. Then whoever they sold it to, she said, is going to have a very bad Friday. The buyer, it turned out, was a land development company out of Bozeman. They had been buying up ranch properties across the county for the past 2 years, planning a resort development. They had paid $1.4 million into an escrow account based on a warranty deed that my daughter had signed as. And this is the part that still takes my breath away. When I think about it, my authorized agent, using a power of attorney document that she had altered. The original document, which Patricia had drafted 3 years earlier, and which had been superseded by the new one 14 months ago, had been modified. Someone had whited out the expiration clause. Someone had extended the effective date by hand and initialed it in what was meant to look like my handwriting. I want to be careful here. I am telling you what the forensic document examiner later determined. I am not telling you what I felt when I heard it, because there are not clean words for that. Patricia contacted the title company Thursday morning. She sent them the trust documentation, the recorded deed, and the new power of attorney. She included a letter, very precise, very calm, explaining that the warranty deed they had received was executed without authority, that the grantor had no legal capacity to convey the property, and that the Callaway Family Land Trust had never been informed of or consented to any sale. The title company pulled the closing. Friday came and went. Melissa called me Friday afternoon. She was not laughing this time. Dad, what did you do? I protected my property, I said. The closing fell through. The title company is saying there's some kind of trust. There is a trust, I said. I set it up 14 months ago. Everything has been in trust since then. Silence. You knew, she said. Her voice had changed. Something had gone out of it. You knew and you didn't tell us. You were selling my ranch, I said, without asking me. Without telling me. Using a document that Patricia tells me appears to have been altered. Did you think I wouldn't find out? More silence. Longer this time. Derek thought. I know what Derek thought, I said. He thought I was a 68-year-old man who wouldn't notice. He thought the land meant less to me than the money. He thought wrong on both counts. I told her I had already spoken to the county sheriff's office. I told her that Patricia had filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office regarding the altered power of attorney. I told her that the development company out of Bozeman had retained their own attorneys and was now investigating the transaction on their end, which was not going to be pleasant for anyone involved. I told her I loved her. I told her I would always love her. And I told her that love and accountability were not the same thing, and that she had confused them for long enough. Then I hung up. The investigation took 4 months. I will not walk you through all of it because much of it was tedious and painful, in the specific way that legal proceedings involving your own children are tedious and painful. But I will tell you the shape of it. The altered document had been prepared with Derek's knowledge and Melissa's signature. The forensic examiner confirmed the tampering. The notary who had certified the document, a woman named Linda Howell, who worked in the same office building as Amanda's sister, was interviewed at length. She eventually cooperated with investigators. Derek's defense was that he had believed the power of attorney was valid. Melissa's defense was that Derek had handled everything, and she had trusted him. Neither defense was particularly convincing given the paper trail. The development company did not lose their money, the escrow funds were returned, but they lost several months and significant legal costs. And they were not quiet about their feelings on the matter. Their attorneys submitted their own findings to the AG's office. On a Wednesday morning in February, Derek and Melissa were each charged with forgery, fraudulent conveyance, and elder financial abuse. The last charge carries mandatory minimums in Montana. They were not handcuffed on my front lawn. I want to be honest about that the movies would have you believe these moments are more dramatic than they are. They were contacted by their attorneys, who told them to turn themselves in, which they did, at the county courthouse on a gray winter morning that I did not attend. I heard about it from Patricia, who called me while I was out checking the fence line along the east pasture. It's done, she said. Okay, I said. How are you doing? I looked out at the meadow. The snow had melted off the south-facing slopes, and the grass was starting to come back, pale green at first, the way it always was in late winter. The creek was running. I could hear it from where I was standing. I'm all right, I said, and I meant it, mostly. There was grief in it, the way there is grief in all true things. But underneath the grief there was something steady, something that did not move. I want to say something to anyone listening who is in a situation like the one I was in. I know what it feels like to look at your children and not recognize them. I know what it feels like to want to believe that the people you raised are the people you thought they were. I spent months making excuses in my own mind. They're stressed. They're worried about me. They don't understand what this land means. I let those excuses run long, past the point where the evidence was clear. The thing I wish I had understood sooner is this. Protecting yourself is not the same as giving up on someone. I did not stop loving my children when I called Patricia. I did not stop loving them when I restructured the trust. I did not stop loving them on the day the charges were filed. Love does not require you to stand still while someone takes everything you have. My father built this ranch with his hands. My mother grew a garden here every summer for 40 years. Carol and I raised our family here, buried our first dog under the cottonwood by the creek, watched our kids learn to ride horses and complain about it, and secretly love it. This land holds more of my life than any other place on earth. It is still mine. The fence line along the east pasture needed 3 new posts. I put them in myself that same afternoon in the pale February sun. The ground was still cold, but it gave way when you worked it right. I was back at the house by 4 o'clock. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window and watched the light change over the north pasture, the way I have watched it change for 31 years. My daughter called me laughing and thought she had won. What she didn't know was that I had already thought of everything. What she didn't know was that the land she was selling had been beyond her reach for over a year. What she didn't know was that I had learned something important, late in my life, that I should have known earlier. The people who love you will never ask you to sign something you don't understand. The sunset came the same as it always does. The grass turned copper. The creek kept running. I finished my coffee and went out to feed the horses.